Hello, my name's Chloe. I am a practicum student at ASU Counseling Services. I wanted to create a brief presentation on self forgiveness. Um, I think there's definitely situations where majority of us have um, been wronged in some form or fashion by someone, and we struggle to find forgiveness of that other person. But sometimes situations happen where the resentment, guilt, shame is directed towards ourselves, where creates an internal conflict of trying to forgive ourselves for something that happened. Um, and so, to give a little bit of a table of contents here, um, I'll go over um, thoughts and emotions that hinder self forgiveness from being achieved. But I'll also talk about ways to achieve self forgiveness um, here in a little bit. But I first want to um, talk about guilt. So, the emotions that can hinder um, self forgiveness. So, emotions like resentment, anger, um, and shame can hinder self forgiveness. But I think guilt is a really big one. Um, and guilt and shame are similar to each other, but a little bit different. Guilt is more towards an action. So you might have thoughts of, I did something bad, where shame is, I am a bad person. It's more directed to the self, who you are as a person, rather guilt is more so towards um like something that you did, not your personal qualities as a human being. Um but with guilt, that can come from different situations, which again I'll talk about here in a minute. But um it creates a sense of responsibility for something happening, which can of course cause a lot of ruminating thoughts. So why do we have guilt? Why do we have shame? Why do we have all these emotions that keep us from forgiving ourselves? That can come from different kinds of situations. So, for instance, loss. Maybe there's guilt around not doing enough to prevent a person's passing. Relationships. Maybe there's some infidelity that happened, and there's guilt for sabotaging a good thing. Um, Abusive relationships. Maybe there's guilt from the survivor for not um, leaving sooner. Parental neglect. So maybe someone has um, a neglectful parent, or a parent that's just not very attentive to that child. Um, Maybe creates a sense of guilt in the child for not being a better son, daughter, not meeting the parents' expectations, um, not being enough. Successes can also create a sense of guilt. So, an example would be maybe someone that grew up in poverty, in adulthood, acquires a lot of wealth or success in their career. And that might create guilt of um, I'm undeserving of this. Um, it's should be someone else, not me. That kind of thing. Um, and health. So maybe someone with a disability um, thinks that they're a burden to their caretakers, which creates a sense of guilt. for being so quote unquote needy or something like that. And there's many more situations that can result in guilt, resentment, shame, anger. But these are just a few to list here as examples. Um, but in terms of negative thoughts, um, so oftentimes with situations like loss, relationships, really any situation, um, there might be should have, could have, would have thoughts. So, for example, um, with loss, there might be thoughts of, I could have visited that person more, should have noticed warning signs. Things would be different if I just paid attention. I hate that I didn't get to say goodbye. If I could turn back time, I'd be nicer to that person that passed. Um, and it, unfortunately, um, time can't be changed, and we'll talk about that later as well. But these thoughts can be unhelpful to us because it keeps us in this space of reminiscing, ruminating, to the point where it's not very helpful in terms of being able to move forward and grow. Um, and as a visual example of these thoughts, I created a diagram that I call circle of beliefs. So in the core of the circle, I have what someone believes about themselves and then what they believe about others in the world based on an event that happened. Um, and so these examples represent a hypothetical situation of someone that survived an abusive or toxic relationship. And so that might create thoughts of, I'm selfish for not uh, leaving, I'm naive for not leaving, or noticing the warning signs. I'm not worthy of love. I'll never be good. I don't deserve anyone. Can't do anything right. And so these negative thoughts that someone has about themselves can create negative generalizations toward other people in the world. So, like, might create thoughts of the world is a dangerous place, people don't value me, I'm unwanted, I can't trust anyone, the world wants to hurt me, people think I'm damaged. And again, these thoughts keep us in a space of um, not having trust in oneself, not being able to have hope in the future, which can create, you know, more depressive thoughts or actions, things like that. I mean, really, it keeps us from functioning in a healthy way because we can't forgive ourselves for the mistakes that we made and things like that. And so, how do we get to that point where we can forgive ourselves? Well, it does take some acceptance of what happened, um, which can be a long journey to find acceptance. Um, but it first starts with acknowledging that the past can't be changed, which is really hard. But again, we don't have time machines yet, anyway. Uh, and so um, it's it's unhelpful to continue thinking about what could have changed, what you should have done. Um, and so we have to focus on um, how to move forward. And that can come from learning what has made you better from that situation. So again, with the hypothetical of someone being in a toxic or abusive relationship, um, might find that they have um, found more confidence in themselves. Maybe they found more independence financially, um, things like that. And also thinking about where you see yourself in the future as a better human being. Um, where do you see yourself despite these bad things that happened? So, um, and this is very much a strength based type of thinking where we're not focusing so much on why we're so terrible and horrible. We're focusing on what what makes us good, what makes us better, um, and that includes um, hopes for the future, things like that. So, again, for the hypothetical example of someone in an abusive relationship, they might see themselves thriving more, not being codependent on someone, um, going to school, um, entering another relationship that's healthy, things like that. And those kind of things give hope that things aren't all bad, you're not all bad. Um, but acceptance stems from having compassion for yourself as well. Um, and that can be hard too. It's really easy to say all the things that we do wrong rather than the things that we do right. Sometimes we get stuck in honing in on just the negative things. And so I like doing forgiveness letters with clients. And so I'll have them think about negative situations that happened, um, whether things that they did that they're not proud of or things that happened to them that wasn't good, and thinking about how they can forgive themselves for that situation, what they're blaming themselves for, evidence to show that they're not a bad person, they're not at fault for something like abuse, things like that. And it can be really cathartic to write all of that down, and get rid of that emotional baggage. But also think about what qualities make you valuable. Again, this is very much a strength based type of thinking, but you know, what qualities do you have that prove that you're not all bad? That that you're worthy. Um, that might be being a hard worker, um, being willing to change, being a motivated person, different things. Um, and you can also list qualities that need improvement. What things do you want to make better about yourself? But it's also important to recognize that mistakes will happen again. Um, and reframe from the judgments about yourself. So, this is a growth mindset. And what I mean by that is people with a fixed mindset don't give a lot of grace for mistakes. Um, a failure is a failure, and they'll always be a failure. Whereas with growth mindset, um, there is grace for mistakes. It's very much thoughts of, hey, like, that wasn't really great of me. but I can do this, this, and this to grow from it. We're having thoughts of, this bad thing happened to me, but it doesn't, totally define my existence. Um, but it's also important to reframe the judgments that you have. So, again, going back to that circle of beliefs, it's important to challenge those thoughts that you're having, um, listing evidence that proves otherwise. So, maybe I have thoughts of, um, I'm not worthy of love. I might challenge that by saying, I have parents that support me, siblings that support me, friends that support me, coworkers that support me. That would counteract that thought. And so, to give a brief overview here, I think the main takeaways I want to encourage here in terms of self forgiveness is to have grace for mistakes that you make. Um, and also acknowledge your growth as a person. Um, we're we're never gonna be the same person throughout life. Um, in some instances, yes, our personality is pretty stable over time, but um, we're not gonna be the same person that we were yesterday. We make different decisions every day. Values change over time, priorities change, things like that. So know that you're not always bad. There's bad and good days. So always keep that in mind. Um, and yeah, I hope this was helpful for folks, struggling with some internal conflict around a situation where there's guilt, shame, anger, resentment towards yourself or something. Um, and hopefully, this is helpful in trying to find ways to overcome that hump just a little bit. But anyways, thanks for watching.